So good evening. Thank you for coming. I am Christina Madsen, along with Chief Illingsworth, co-chair of the Public Safety Building Committee. The committee was formed over 2 years ago, and we are nearing the completion of the feasibility study phase. And so thought this was a good opportunity to invite our residents to learn what we have done and to hear your comments and answer your questions. So the evening will be divided into 3 different sections. I'll describe that in a few minutes. And before I have the committee introduce themselves, we're a diverse committee of talent and a very hard-working group that has devoted quite a few hours over these past few years, 2 years, to getting us to where we are now. But before the committee members introduce themselves, I'd also like to welcome Janet Slamenda and Amy Dunlap from HKT Architects in Charlestown, Mass. They are conducting the feasibility study and have been working closely with the committee and especially with the 2 chiefs to understand our needs and provide the basic outline of what we will propose as a new public facility. So, welcome. And I think now I'll just have so that you will understand the diversity and skill of this committee, I would like each of them to just briefly introduce themselves. Chief, we can start with you.
Good evening. My name's Ian Illingsworth. I'm the police chief here in Southampton. I've been a chief for about 5 years in Southampton and employed as a police officer for about 30 years in Southampton, working in that same building. So I know the inside and out of that building pretty well. But it's been a pleasure to work with this committee, and you're going to see how diverse and talented this committee was chosen for this reason. I think you're going to see that when people introduce themselves. Thank you.
Hello, my name's Rich Fasoli, fire chief here in Southampton. I've been on the department for 31 years. I'd like to just thank you all for coming.
Hi, I'm Mark Darnold. I've been a resident in town for almost 40 years and a professional engineer for all that time as well. Been involved in the design of municipal and public facilities, including several fire stations over the last 35 or 40 years. So.
Thank you. Scott Zabak, town administrator for 4 weeks. So not quite as long as you know the decades that the chiefs have and everyone, but it's great to be here, and it's awesome to come at the end of this because I've seen the amount of work that they've done, and it's amazing, just the hours and time and effort that they put into it. So, thank you.
Hi, I'm Mark Mancino, and my background is building mechanical systems and energy management, and I've worked for different companies doing like the Basketball Hall of Fame, doing management over there, as well as some high-rise buildings, and it's been doing that for 30 years. So thank you.
Hi, I'm John O'Shea. I've been a resident of the town since 2010. Retired from the Springfield Fire Department, so I had that experience. I spent some time on a building committee in Springfield for their newest fire station, so I'm hoping that that experience will translate and help this project.
Hi, I'm Charlie Konecki. I've been a resident of town for 70-something years. I am a retired state district health officer presently I'm your health agent. I've been involved in inspecting these types of facilities through my career, and I'm looking forward to seeing this move forward.
I think most people know me, Chris Fowles. I'm actually here representing the Select Board, but I'm a lifelong resident of Southampton, having been displaced a little bit from my career overseas, which was involving community economic development for about 30 years. So I'm coming at it from a different angle, budgeting and management in that regard. And I think we have two people that are absent tonight, and I'll let Chris tell you who those are.
Yes, there are two who couldn't join us tonight. Barry Searle is the Historical Commission rep on this committee. He is retired. His career was public health, and he has extensive knowledge of septic engineering, perk tests, and so forth, Title V knowledge. So he is our newest member, our most recent member, and a great addition. And then Cindy Palmer is our rep for the senior community, excuse me. And she and her husband have been in town for about 28 years. She is chair of the Open Space Committee and the Almoners, co-chair of the Friends of Council on Aging, member of the Board of Assessors, and a former member of the Planning Board. And I'm a furniture maker. I've been building and designing furniture for about 50 years. I am a longtime member of the Historical Commission and the Master Plan Implementation Committee. And along with Barry, Chris, and Charlie, I am a Southampton native. So the evening will be divided into three sections. First of all, East Hampton Media has produced a video of the current facilities that the two forces are working in, and we will show that first. It's about a 20-minute film. And then Janet and Amy will present a PowerPoint about the work that they have done for us and what we've been doing together. And then we'll have a 5-minute break, and the rest of the evening will be for questions and answers. And if we're going to we offer two opportunities. You can either come to a mic to ask your questions, or if not comfortable doing that, we have note cards and pencils at the back, and you can write your questions and submit them, and we will get as many answered tonight as we can, and those that we don't have time for will be answered. This is the first public forum. We anticipate, as time goes along, that we will offer another. So we will start now with the film. And Jackson, I don't know your last name. Jackson Foote has produced this video, and we owe special thanks to Denise Riggs for her participation as the tour guide in the film, and also to Jim Palermo for his advice in the project. So thanks to all.
So my name is Amy Dunlap again from HKT Architects, and this is Janet Slamenda. We are principals with HKT. Janet and I have worked together for almost 24 years. Our firm does a lot of municipal work in Massachusetts, a lot of public safety buildings, fire stations and police stations standalone. And I think of all the public safety projects that we've worked on in our office, either Janet or I or both of us have worked on them. So we've got a lot of experience. We've seen a lot of different situations in public safety, existing conditions in stations around the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, and have helped a lot of communities just like yours bring these projects through to fruition. So as Christina said, I'm just going to talk a little bit about the process we went through with the Public Safety Committee on the feasibility study, and let you know where things stand right now. So let me grab. That might be useful, yeah. That might be. We're going to turn the lights off so you can see the slides a little bit better. Is that better for folks? Okay. Here, this is just the team that worked on this project with us. We did have some consultants that we work with regularly. Par Corporation was our civil and structural engineers who worked on the project. GGD Consulting engineers are our mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection engineers. And then TCI, or Totoro Consulting, was the cost consultant who did the cost estimating on the project. This is a team that we go to time and time again when we work on projects like this. They've got experience just like we have on public safety and municipal projects in Massachusetts. And more importantly, I think they're people who think the way we do and they approach design problems the way we do. So it's a really successful collaboration and bring a lot of expertise from the projects that we've worked on in the past as we go through these projects. So the first step whenever we start a feasibility project is to get a sense of the existing conditions. Much like you just walked through the buildings with Denise, we did the same thing with the chiefs. We walked through the buildings and we started what's called a space needs assessment or program development. We sit down and interview the chiefs. We have them fill out questionnaires with all kinds of questions about what their current operations are, where they see their operations going in the future, looking out 5, 10, 20 years in the future so that we can make sure that we size your building not just for the work that they do today, but for what they anticipate the changes will be in the future. We're at the same time looking at best practices for what we see other communities doing around Massachusetts and what we find other departments are doing in their operations and making sure that the expertise we have is brought into that program development. As we're taking the tours, we're looking at their existing facilities to see what works and what doesn't work. Clearly, most of what we saw when we went through your facilities was what's not working right now. But we want to talk about how those departments function uniquely, because even though we have seen what we've seen from working with all these departments around the Commonwealth is that oftentimes in these stations, while they have similar spaces, how they use them is slightly different. And we really want to understand what the operations are that are unique to the Southampton Fire and Police Department so that we can make sure we design a building that works for you. It doesn't work for Northampton or East Hampton. It works for the people of Southampton and the departments in Southampton. So once we have these conversations, we start to develop a program, and that's really a spreadsheet of spaces. We look at all of the different departments and functional areas within the departments, so administration areas, operation areas. We figure out exactly what your needs are in those spaces for both for space, for square footage, if there are any special things that you need in there for water hookups, for power hookups, any special interactions between two different spaces. Do they need to be adjacent? Do they need to have physical connections? Those are all the sorts of things we're looking at as we're developing the program and figuring out exactly how big your building needs to be. One of the things that you heard about in the existing conditions walkthrough there was healthy spaces and what's healthy and what's not healthy. There's a lot of focus in the industry right now on, in particular, fire departments and making sure that there's a safe process for firefighters to decontaminate themselves and their gear when they come back from a fire. When firefighters go to a fire and it's actively burning, all those materials in the space that are burning release all kinds of vapors, all kinds of fumes, all kinds of soot, and that can have a lot of carcinogens in it. They're getting that on their gear, they're getting it on their bodies, they're getting it on their skin, they're getting it on their hair, and then they've got to go back to the station and somehow they've got to get all of those carcinogens off. So there's been a lot of focus on the design industry about how to do that safely in a building and how to create what we call hot and cold zones. And the hot zones are spaces when they come back from the station, they've got those contaminants on their body. The cold zones are the living quarters, the office quarters where you don't want those contaminants to be. And then there needs to be a transition zone between those so that they can clean all of that off themselves, clean it all off their gears, make sure they're not dragging it through the station and recontaminating themselves over time. So that is something that is really important in fire station design right now. And it's a process to figure out what your operations are and how that flow will work for your unique building. That's something we work with the every department on trying to figure out. And I think it's something that we've worked really hard to make work in this building as well. When we put all those pieces together, we get program for the building. In this chart, you can see, get my highlighter here to show you. This is the program that we initially came up with when we started working with the department. And we've got here a comparison to what was the program back in 2014 when the study was done before. One thing to note, the way every designer approaches programming is a little bit different. There are net square footages and there are gross square footages. Net square footages are the dimensions or the space between the walls. So when you look at this room, for example, the distance from the face of that wall to the face of that wall and the face of that wall to the face of this wall, if we added that up, multiplied it out, that would be the net square footage. When you look at gross square footage, you're taking the size of the depth of that wall. You're taking the any circulation spaces, hallways, things like that. You're taking plumbing chases and you're adding all of that in. So I'm sure there's going to be some discussion about comparisons about the 2014 program to the 2023 program, and what you need to understand is that they were approached a little bit differently. So when you look at those numbers, in 2014, these are net numbers, and in 2023, these are gross numbers. So they're not quite apples to apples, they're apples to oranges, really. And you really have to look at the bottom line numbers here for comparison. When we did the first program, we came up with 29,968 gross square feet. We ran that by the departments in the committee. They took a look at it and they said, you know what, we can cut some of this out. We can make it a little bit smaller, a little bit tighter. And through that process, we were able to reduce it down to 28,304 square feet. When you do the program, though, that's just a guideline. You have to really design the building to figure out exactly how it's going to be. And I'll show you the design process in a minute, but we were able to cut even more square footage by a very efficient floor plan that we developed through that process. So in the end, the building that we're looking at is 26,895 gross square feet, I should say. So with the program set, we had our engineers start to do site evaluations. And the committee asked us to look at 3 different sites in town. Park Corporation looked at them. And the 3 sites were the site of the existing fire station, 204, 210 College Highway, 79 Clark Street, and 125 College Highway. There's some images here of the, whoops, I'm sorry, wrong button. There we go. Some images here of the sites that we looked at. There are boards in the back of the room as well that you can see in a little bit more detail, the site evaluations and the sites that we looked at. This was a desktop review. They were able to go out and gain access to 2 of the sites. One of the property owners was unavailable to give them permission to get access to that site, but they did walk 2 of the sites, and then they looked at publicly available data on a whole host of different site factors in order to do their engineering analysis. We took that engineering analysis and presented it to the committee, and then we used that information to rank the sites as part of this site matrix. And the site matrix looked at 6 different categories: location, accessibility, site features, environmental, site development, and availability. And each of those categories had subcategories, and maximum points were assigned to each of those subcategories. We had a lengthy discussion with the committee where we went through each one of those sites, each one of those bullet points, and based on the engineering analysis and the information that we had, we assigned point values to that category for that particular site. At the end of it, we summed all of it, and the sites that ranked the highest, the 2 sites that ranked the highest, which were 204, 210 College Highway and 125 College Highway, were selected to continue on in the process and for further consideration as the final site for the public safety building. At that point, we took those 2 sites and we did some test fits. And what that involves is basically taking the building program and blocking it off into large-scale components, for example, police operations or fire department living quarters, just big blocks of space, and start to organize them on the site how they might be organized in a building, put parking in, put other site features that we know would be necessary, and see whether or not these sites were going to work. When we started it, we had the engineers do another little quick analysis of the sites. You can see that here. So 204, 210 College Highway is about an 8-acre parcel, and it's owned by the town of Southampton. It did have a lot of challenges, though, that we saw right off the bat. There is the issue of a historic structure, the existing fire station, and how that would be viewed through historic committees and the Mass Historic Organization. There was reported high groundwater issues, and there was exposed bedrock and boulders that were seen, which could create complications for site development. As you all know, there's really a very steep or considerable slope going up the site, so that places some complications for developing the site, for parking circulation, for where you place different things on the building. There are wetlands, there's a potential riverfront setback, and the soils themselves are not generally conducive to on-site septic systems without raising the grade or having a pumped system there. So a number of complications we saw right off the bat. What you see here are some examples of the test fits that we do. So we did 2 different options. This is option 1, and it's the ground floor and then the upper floor, and option 2, ground floor and upper floor here. And we looked at them for the building layout and what we thought, how that would function, and then we asked our engineers to take a look at it and give us an idea of what they saw some of the complications would be as well. In this one, it was recognized that for either option there was going to be extensive earthwork that was going to be needed. We were probably going to need to do some extensive regrading, possibly some retaining walls between buildings to create tiers. We would probably have to reconstruct the town hall parking to make it work with that circulation. There was extensive permitting, as I said, because of the wetlands and the potential riverfront. We knew they were going to be challenged with the on-site septic, and because of all that, there were going to be challenges with stormwater design. So there were a lot of issues working with the existing site. The second site we looked at was 125 College Highway, and when the committee asked us to first look at it, what we were really looking at was the 4-acre parcel right here that was potentially going to be donated to the town. One of the concerns that we saw right off the bat with that site was access out to College Highway for emergency response vehicles. So we discussed when we did the test fit options, to do 2 different versions. One where we put the public safety building just on this site, and a second option where we took over what was identified as a potential commercial property up here, so that public safety vehicles could exit onto College Highway through that parcel right there. So we expanded the footprint a little bit to look at that. In general, the site was much more favorable to development. The soils seemed to be suitable for stormwater and for sewage disposal. It's a pretty flat site, so there were fewer grading issues that we saw on the existing fire station site. There were no natural heritage issues. There was no waterfront setback or anything like that we saw on the existing fire station site. So we proceeded with a couple of different test fit options. Option 1, whoops, sorry, wrong button. Option 1 here, again, was just on that donated parcel, and option 2 expanded so that we took over the commercial parcel here so that public safety vehicles could access out onto College Highway rather than having to access out onto a road that has not been built yet, and that road would have had to go out and connect to College Highway. When we had the engineers take a look at this, we all agreed that this was really a better site for a whole lot of reasons. The lot size supported all of the programming needs and really offered a lot of different opportunities for how the building could be laid out and how the site features could be laid out. We didn't anticipate any issues with septic or with stormwater permitting. There were no, as I said, any buffers issues for any endangered species or any wetlands or anything like that. So after presenting these options to the committee agreed that option number 2, where the vehicles had direct access out to College Highway, was really the preferred scheme to look at a little bit further. So at this point, the project for the designers, was put on hold while the committee did a little bit of work to figure out how they could potentially make this work, since this is not a town-owned parcel at this time. So we took a little pause, they did some negotiations, and then they came back to us and said, okay, what we want to look at is the donated parcel here, which is that parcel in purple, and then the previous test fit, which is option 2 that you see here, had been looking at this entire block of land. And they said, well, what if we just looked at half of that and had a connection out to College Highway through this green parcel here? So those were our marching orders to take the design to the next level. And again, we didn't see any issues with that lot size. We thought that would work fine, and so we took it to the next level, and we developed some floor plans on that site and some concept plans for the site to see how that would work. We did 2 different options. The first was putting everything on 1 story, so it was a 1-story public safety building. And then the second was a 2-story public safety building. Both of those had designs that included some carports. It's kind of hard to see on here, but you can definitely see this on the boards in the back of the room if you walk around a little bit after. But we had some carports right here and right here for the police and fire departments to store some of their equipment and keep it sheltered from the elements. We also had a remote shooting range here for the police department. In general, the layout for both of these was very similar. You can see on the 2 site plans, we've got the building here. The red arrows indicate where the fire department apparatus would exit the building. So the first run apparatus could leave the building here and could go out a drive straight out to College Highway. There was parking for the fire department over here, parking for visitors over here, parking for police department over here, the main entrance to the building right here, the sally ports here. You see the same thing, these plans, everything in blue is police department spaces, everything in sort of the pink tone are fire department spaces, the green spaces are shared spaces, and the gray spaces are building systems, mechanical rooms, electrical rooms, those sorts of things that are shared just for the functioning of the building. For both of these schemes worked for the program. They met all the operational needs for the fire and police departments. The big difference was square footage, because the 1-story scheme did not need an elevator. It did not need 2 sets of stairs. It had shorter corridors as a result of being a more compact plan. So it was going to save considerably on the square footage, and therefore save considerably how much it cost the town of Southampton. So the committee voted to move forward with option 1, which was the 1-story option. Here you have a little bit of an enlarged site plan to show a little bit of what I was talking about before. So right now we are showing 2 drives coming in off of College Highway here. The idea would be that one drive would be for fire department emergency apparatus leaving the site. The other could be available for the public. That separation would be something that we'd be looking at with Mass DOT, since it's a state highway, but it is a possibility. And then the secondary entry to the site would be designed over here so that if a road were to be built in the future, coming in off of College Highway, there would be a secondary entry point into the site from that area. As I said before, fire department has parking over here, the police department has parking over here. There are opportunities to gate those off if that becomes an important thing for the department, so that that's separate from the public, and that really separates the operations zone for the building and keeps that separate from the public. The police department would bring detainees in here through a proper drive-through sally port and into the booking areas, and you see the public access here. For any public safety building, there's a lot to be said about the fire apparatus and how the fire apparatus moves around the site. We're talking about large vehicles, obviously. They have turning radiuses that need to be respected, and that has a lot to do with the placement of any public safety building. One of the benefits of having this set back is that there's plenty of room for that circulation to happen, so that when fire apparatus is returning to the site, they have plenty of room to back into the building safely. It's not like in some towns or in some locations where they have to stop traffic and do that out on a street. All of that can be done internally, which is a great benefit to this site. Okay. This is the first floor plan for that one-story scheme that was developed with the departments. Again, the yellow arrow here indicates where the public entry would be. So there's a lobby space here with which continues down here and leads into a community room that would also be used as the training and EOC room. And then from there, there's some public toilets. There's access to administrators and into interview rooms and permitting rooms, and there's a lockdown at that space. So the public only goes into that zone, and beyond that, they have to be invited and have to be escorted by the police or fire department. All the blue spaces, as I said, are police. All the offices are located along the perimeter, so they have access to natural light with more sensitive things happening inboard. The detention block is back here, and this resolves a lot of the issues that the chief was talking about in the presentation. There's a sally port, a proper size sally port, where a detainee can be brought into the station. It can be locked down. The overhead doors are locked down, and that detainee transfer can happen in a safe way into holding area and booking, and off of that, the cells, which are all in a very private area, separated from the rest of the building, so there isn't any sight sound issues with potential victims and potential people who've been arrested interacting. The fire department has the fire apparatus here, and then off of that, we have those hot and cold zones that I talked about earlier, ways for the firefighters to come into the building, to go into a decontamination area where they have proper laundry facilities. They can wash their gear, they can get those contaminants off of it, they can get into showers, clean their bodies before they move into any of the office spaces, which are up here, or any of the bunk rooms and day room, which are located back here. They've got all those proper storage spaces along the perimeter. So, again, the whole focus of the committee and us as designers is to make sure that the building meets all the needs for the fire department and police department, that it meets all of the health and safety standards for a modern fire department, and that it meets all the security and functionality and safety concerns of a modern police department. From there, we presented some elevation options for what the building might look like. We presented two different options that you see here. Option A, which is the upper one on the slide, consisted of asphalt shingle pitched roofs, a masonry base, which we do in a lot of public safety buildings for durability, and then fiber cement siding and trim up above that, which is what you see in the gray. On operable windows throughout, so that any of the occupants would have access to ventilation. Option B was a slightly different look with flat roofs and masonry everywhere. It could be a brick, or it could be a CMU, or a concrete masonry unit product, and again with operable windows. We presented these to the committee and talked a lot about materials and about building form and what we were trying to do here. The committee selected option B, B, which is the one below her, because we talked to them a lot about cost. And one of the things that we told them was that a flat roof generally is a lot less expensive than a pitched roof. The structure is less expensive. You're not building all that extra volume for spaces that really aren't housing anything. And the masonry also has a lower maintenance over its lifetime, which is something that's really important for a municipality to not have to deal with a lot of maintenance issues. The committee asked us, though, to redesign option B a little bit. They felt that it didn't necessarily fit in with the historic nature of the town of Southampton, and they were hoping to bring a little bit more of that historic feel into the design. So we went back to the drawing board, and we came up with what ended up being the final preferred elevation. And we've got some 3D views here to give you a sense of what that building would look like. So this is a view from the public parking area, sort of where that future roadway connection would be as you enter the site. This is the main entrance into the building, the main public entrance into the building. On this side of the building, these windows are all into police department office spaces. The fire department office spaces are all along the front here, and then you see the apparatus space here. This is looking from the fire department parking area, so you get a sense of what those apparatus bays look like here. And then this is a hose drying training tower for the fire department. And then this is looking back from the police department parking area. This is the door looking into the Sally Port, where the detainees would be brought in. Again, this is where all the office spaces are. There are no windows in this one area here because those are secure spaces, evidence processing, evidence storage, places where you don't want any access to the exterior of the building. And then the back parking area, the back apron for the apparatus bays here. There's a secondary entrance here for the fire department into the living quarters, the day room, and all the bunk rooms are back here. Tucked in the corner here, there's a secondary entrance for the police department. And then these again are doors into the Sally Port and the police garage space. So while we were busy with the design pieces, we also brought GGD, our mechanical, electrical, plumbing, fire protection engineers in to talk a little bit about HVAC system options and the process of life cycle cost analysis. This is something that will happen actually at the next phase, really, where we do a life cycle cost assessment. This is where the engineers propose different mechanical systems that you would use in the building, and then they look at the first cost, installed cost for those systems. They look at the utility costs for those proposed systems over time, given the building model that you are developing. They look at maintenance costs for example, how many filters are going to need to be changed, what's the lifespan of different pieces of equipment, when would they need to be replaced, and they look out generally 50 years. And based on that, once they add up all those different costs, they can tell you what is, over the lifespan of the building, the most economical equipment or system selection. As I said, it's something that's generally done at the next phase of the project during schematic design, but they did meet with the committee and talk to them about the systems that they generally put in this type of building, and if they were to design it today, what types of systems they might recommend. And we took 3 systems, and we gave a narrative description of those 3 systems to our cost estimators so that they could price those out, and you could get a sense of at least what the first costs for those systems would be at this time. We're doing this with another project right now that's actually in the design development phase. We just completed this process with them. And one of the things that is really important to note are all of the incentives and grant programs that are out there right now for sustainable HVAC systems. So there are substantial utility incentives for electric heat pumps and tax credits for geothermal systems. And the tax credits are through the Inflation Reduction Act. And those can really help defray the cost for the town that we just worked in when we did the life cycle cost assessment. Even though a geothermal system, for example, had the highest upfront cost, over the life, it was the least expensive system because of the rebates that they were going to get back very shortly after construction was complete. So When you get into the next phase of this project, that's something that the engineers will be looking at and discussing with the town and figuring out what makes the most sense. So the committee was also really interested in green design, and so we did put together a few different options for some green design elements for pricing, things that could be added into the project if the town decided to. But I think one of the most important things for people to understand is that we do have a new energy code in Massachusetts that was promulgated in 2023, and that has had a substantial impact on the design of municipal buildings, for any buildings really in Massachusetts. But we are seeing a big cost implication. And it's something to consider when you're comparing projects that are going to be built 2023 moving forward versus projects that have been built in the past. There are certain things that are required by the energy code, by the new energy code. One of them is that 20% of parking spaces that you provide have to be electric vehicle charger ready. You have to have the infrastructure in the building in place. You have to have the circuits going out to the parking space. You don't have to put the actual charger in yet, but you have to have everything else there so that if the charger's out in the future, it's plug and play. Similarly, you have to do the same thing with photovoltaics for solar panels on the roof. The roof has to be designed to carry that structure. You have to have conduits going to the roof. You have to have room for the equipment in the future. So you don't have to have the panels in right now, but you have to have all of that in place. And then we have to design a very high performance building envelope. The exact requirements for a building like this need to be figured out during the design process with some comprehensive energy modeling. But we're seeing a lot of similar projects are required to have added insulation in the walls, added insulation in the roof, beyond what we would have done just a couple of years ago. We're finding projects that are needing to put triple glazed windows in and really high performance window units in order to meet all those needs. So those all have cost implications and are just a basic requirement of the building code at this time. Beyond that, we did price out some green features that could be added should the town decide to, and they could be added as alternates later. Now I will go over that pricing in a minute. So at this point, when we had that level of information on the design, it was time to give this information to our cost estimator to figure out what the probable cost would be. The cost estimator works with hard construction costs, and hard construction costs are the costs that you would be charged by a general contractor coming in and building the building. The cost estimator uses the estimating package we give them, which is limited drawings that have been done to this point in time, as well as the narratives we talked about with the HVAC system, descriptions of all these green options that we were pricing, and includes all those code features that I was just talking about. At this point, the design is obviously not fully developed, so where information isn't available, the cost estimator makes certain assumptions, either based on what we tell him or what he knows about similar projects from working with us over time. And then they carry a pricing contingency, which is, at this stage in a project, generally 10% to cover all of the unknowns that might be needed later on. Hard construction costs are just one piece of the total project costs for a building, though. There are also soft costs, and soft costs are, in addition to the construction cost, there are things like furniture, fixtures, and equipment. There are fees and expenses, architecture and engineering fees, commissioning fees, any legal fees you might have, printing costs, all kinds of different things that go into the soft costs. We like to describe it as if you took a building, you took the roof off, you turned it upside down and shook it, all the things that would fall out, those are soft costs, as well as the fees for design services. And then there's a contingency that's carried for all the things that you don't know. You never know when you start digging what things you might encounter. You never know what changes you might have to make later on. And so the owners carry a contingency to cover those sorts of things. So the total project costs are the sum of the hard costs and the soft costs. And as you get further in a design, you can really define those soft costs. But at the early phases, we know that those tend to be about 25% of the hard construction costs. So we just carry a percentage at the early phases of design. So this spreadsheet sort of summarizes those hard and soft construction costs. And to give you an idea of what we're doing here, so over on the the right here, you see different items. So the building and the site cost is in this line, and then we had separated out the cost of the carport for the fire department, the carport for the police department, and an allowance for the shooting range. And the sum of those all together are the subtotal of the hard construction costs. This column shows the estimate when we first presented to the building committee. And when we presented it, they immediately recognized that there were some cost-saving choices that they could make, including putting the carports and the shooting range on hold. So highlighted here in red, you see where we stand right now with the project. So the hard construction estimate puts the project at about $27.4 million. And then the soft costs are about 25% of that, or $6.8 million. And then we would recommend carrying an owner's contingency of 10%. So the subtotal of the soft costs, which is this number and this number, is $9.6 million. And then the total project cost is the sum of these hard construction costs and the soft construction costs, or about $37 million. These are the prices for the different alternates, for the green design alternates that we had the cost estimator estimate. The first two are two of the HVAC options that the engineers presented. The first option that they presented was just in the base cost. So you can see for one of the options, there would be what's known as a deduct, or it would be a savings to the project if this option were selected, a savings of $152,000. Whereas if you added, this is doing a geothermal system, the geothermal system would add about $2.4 million to the project. And then these are some other green options that we gave the committee to consider. We have to, in the base design, as I said, we have to have parking spaces that are EV ready and a roof that's PV ready, but actually putting the charging stations in now or putting the solar panels in now, we gave them costs for that. We gave them a cost if they chose to do what's called rainwater harvesting or collecting stormwater so that you can use it for flushing toilets or for watering plants. That's about $500,000, or putting a green roof in, so a vegetative, plant-based roof system on the building rather than a membrane roof. That would be another $1.9 million. And those, again, are just options. There's nothing that has to be incorporated into the building. So, one thing we wanted to talk to you about a little bit is about construction cost escalation, again, because there are frequently comparisons that are made between projects that happened in the years past versus what's going on now. In addition to the changes in the energy code, I think it's really important to understand construction cost escalation. So prices are always going up. And for a long time in our industry, we looked at an escalation from year to year. We would assume costs would go up about 3.8 to 4% a year. But then the pandemic hit. And as you all know, costs went haywire for people as you were going to the supermarket and everything. Well, there was also a real impact on the construction industry. When the pandemic first hit, beginning in 2020, there were supply chain issues, there were worker shortages, companies closed, both suppliers, contractors. All of that had an impact on costs, as there was just less availability of all of this. And then since 2020, inflation continues to grow. So during that period, what we saw from 2020 until what's still going on now is we've seen costs fluctuating all over the place and escalation ranging from 8% to up to 15% per year. And it hasn't really leveled off just yet. We are certainly hoping that it will, but I'm going to show you on the next slide what might happen in the future. And as we're looking to the future and we're talking to our cost estimator, we're hoping right now we're seeing escalation at between 7 and 10% a year. And we're hoping that it starts to level off in the next couple of years, maybe down to 6%, and then beyond that start to get back to the 4%, but we're not seeing that yet. So that is having really a huge impact on where costs will go in the future. So we like to say that there's sort of a cost to doing nothing, and that's what we're trying to show you here with this slide. So it's a little difficult to see, but in this green bar right here, we're showing if this project were bid in mid-2025, we're assuming right now an escalation rate to get us from the costs in 2024 to 2025. We're seeing that escalation rate at about 8%. And that gets us the $37 million project that we just talked about a minute ago. If that project had been built in 2019 and we sort of de-escalated that back on the real escalation percentages that we've seen since then, that same project in 2019, right here, would have cost about $20.1 million. So you see just in those 6 years, we've gone from $20 million to $37 million. If the project is put on hold and isn't built for another 10 years, going out to 2035, and escalation does what we're hoping it does, which is go back down to the 4%. So here we're assuming another 8% in 2026, 6% in 2027, and then leveling back out to 4% that we've seen historically. But that would bring us to $57.9 million in 10 years for the exact same project. So there's a real cost of not acting right now. So that's what I have to present, Christina.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure to work with you, and we look forward to finishing up the project. So we're going to break now for 5 minutes, and I hope there will be plenty of questions and that we'll have plenty of answers for you. As I said, we're going to set up a mic so that those who are willing will come to the mic to ask their questions, and those who would prefer to write them and submit them. You have the opportunity to do so, and I'll speak out loudly again when I want us to reconvene. All right, we're going to begin again, and I hope that we will have a line at the mic. So do we have any questions? And the mic is here in front.
Hi, I'm John Sheehan, live on this street, Pomeroy Meadow Road. First, I'd like to thank the people on the committee for all the hard work. This is amazing, all the work you've been doing without anyone in town knowing about it, so thank you. Secondly, I'm just really impressed that how comprehensive your proposals and plans are, covering everything, even down to trying to make things green. A word of caution, though, is I think people that are trying to make things green, and this is a positive statement, not criticizing green proposals, they're worried about the cost. It might cost $1 million for this, $2 million for this, but you have to also build in the payback. The payback, if you are investing $1 million for solar panels or renewable energy, and I highly endorse that, especially seeing pictures and hearing the problems with firefighters in cold conditions. And we're probably, as taxpayers, paying a lot more for the space heaters and everything else they've had to just keep the workers safe and warm through the winter. So I highly encourage you to continue on that track and to build the cost in the presentations to the rest of the town. I'm very disappointed we don't have a bigger crowd here tonight to hear this, because it's fantastic information you're presenting. The other thing, if you are looking at the green proposals, and I don't know any details of what you have under that umbrella, have you looked at the sites, the 3 sites that were proposed originally, as far as the sun goes and the things that solar experts look at when they're proposing to put together a renewable energy program for construction going on? And I don't know if you can answer that now.
Well, I think I'll take a stab at it unless you want to dive right in. I'll start and you can add or correct. Since we have chosen a flat roof, I think that offers the opportunity for the photovoltaic panels to be oriented in the optimal position. And as that is now an open field, we're not contending with any forest land. Perhaps that answers your question regarding the orientation of the building on the different sites. And then as far as the green energy goes, indeed the initial costs we're learning can be considerably more, but the payback over time usually offsets those costs. And our task as a committee is to persuade our residents that the initial cost will be offset and that it will be worth it in the long term.
Mm-hmm. Good. Thank you.
Would you like someone else to add to what I have said?
If they want to add things, I think the more information we get out tonight and the future meetings, the better we are.
I mean, I think Christina sort of nailed it with the PV. When we get into later phases, if the town is interested in exploring that, we would do a PV study where the engineers would, again, model the building, take into consideration where its location is, what the weather, historic weather data is, and they'd figure out what types of energy you'd be projected to generate from those PV panels, and then what kind of savings based on utility costs, so you can make the determination whether or not in the long term that would be something that the town would want to invest in. And the same thing with the HVAC systems. They can do a life cycle cost assessment on geothermal, as I said, and they look at all those different components, not just upfront cost, but maintenance, utility costs, and can give you a cost over the life of, or at least over 50 years, what the actual cost of different systems would be, so you can compare it and you can decide whether or not the savings that you get over the 50 years is worth the investment for something up front.
Yeah, that's exactly what I was asking, yeah.
Yep.
I'd like to make a suggestion to the committee too. You said you're going to have some open houses or walkthroughs for people, and I think that's great. The more people we can get to see up close the police station and the fire station, just as a taxpayer and a citizen of this town, I'm embarrassed that we have people who are putting their lives on the line for us and our safety, having to work in such bad conditions. But I have a suggestion. My suggestion is, instead of just picking a couple of dates, which you may get some people, you may not, to make it attractive so that people want to go in to the police station and fire station to see it. And one way you attract people on things like that is to give them some food.
Got that, chiefs?
Yeah, I'm serious. I'm not asking you to put that into the project budget. As one who has done a lot of this kind of work in communities, there are people and businesses in the community that would be happy to make a donation of coffee, donuts, or whatever you use, and to say, free refreshments, come and see the fire station and the police station.
That's an excellent suggestion. We will work on that.
John, as a matter of principle, the police department can't give out donuts, okay? Maybe something else, all right?
Excellent, thank you. Another question. I have some written ones here, but I would like everyone to come to the mic first.
Good evening. I'm David Huntley on East Street. I had two quick questions, I think. We talked about tax credits if we go with the green route. I'm just curious how you get tax credits on an entity that doesn't pay tax.
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's a question that we're working through right now with another town that we're working in. I'm not a tax attorney and I'm not an accountant. I do know that these are out there for the Inflation Reduction Act, and that part of the Inflation Reduction Act was trying to level the playing field so that municipalities who couldn't take advantage of these tax credits in the past are now able to take care of these or take advantage of these tax credits. I don't know at this stage exactly what the process is for doing that, but I do know that the goal was to, as I say, level the playing field so that municipalities could get some money back. So it's something that, on our project that we're doing right now, the town is just starting to explore and trying to find a tax attorney that can help them through the process. So we can certainly follow up with the committee as we learn more, but I don't have the specifics of the mechanics of how a town collects on that.
Yeah,
but one other thing I can say that, so there were two different things we talked about. One is utility incentives, and the other are the tax credits through the Inflation Reduction Act. The utility incentives are definitely available, and that's part of Mass Save, and that's definitely available to municipalities.
But it was a credit that caught my attention.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying.
It ends up being a grant of some sort or something. Or other.
Yeah.
I guess my only concern was that we go in with our eyes wide open and don't think we're going to get X million dollars of grants and or of credits. And obviously, we don't pay tax, so unless you're going to share it with all of us. So.
Right. And in the town we're talking about this with right now, they're trying to even figure out what impact that would have on how they bond and how they borrow money. Because you still have to, have the money in place to pay for construction up front, and you're going to get this money back later on. But could they bond it in a way so that and again, I'm not a finance person, so I don't know if I can talk my way through this whole thing, but if they could do it in a way so that they don't have to bond certain pieces of it in anticipation of that money coming back to the town in the future. So lots of good questions, certainly, to look into.
And the second question was related to all the EV charging station you're putting in there. If they put them in now, I understand with all the new crazy codes that we have to follow, that's all required to be prepped. But if we actually put the EV stations in, does that mean anybody in town can go and charge for free, or will we charge people that use them?
That would be something that the town would have to work out and figure out.
Because I've passed many municipalities where people are lined up waiting for free electricity, and that's not part of the deal. I'm not paying for somebody else's charge.
Yep.
So.
And, this town that we're working in right now, they're also looking at grant opportunities for installing the chargers right now, too. So I've heard there's money out there for that.
Well, the grant money is still tax money. It's just from a different pocket. So, thank you.
Carl Keener, County Road. I just got one quick question. There's been scuttlebutt going around about the town trying to purchase this entire piece of property. Is that going to slow us down, put us back to square one, or what is that? How is that going to affect us?
Scott, will you answer that question, please?
Thank you. So what I can share is that the town is currently in negotiations with the landowners. We are aiming to have the land acquisition for the May 7th town meeting. So if everything works out, the town will be making a decision on the purchase of the parcel.
So we should be able to just move forward from this point then?
Yes.
Okay.
Diana Fetterman, Birchwood Drive. I think I can shed a little bit of light on the tax credit issue because I've worked on applying for those for the Congregational Church here in town, which of course also does not pay taxes, but under the Inflation Reduction Act, we can apply to the IRS and under a program called Direct Pay and get a tax credit, even though technically it's not a credit because we didn't owe any tax, but that's how it works.
Thanks, Diana. All right, the chief has a question. Oh, no, Tammy, come. Step right up.
Tammy Walunas, College Highway. With having a hot zone and a cold zone, and us not having a septic system, sewer system, we're going to have 2 septic systems here now, and one to collect all the chemicals, and where is that going to be dumped? And the regular gray water, another place, and has that leach field been put in where it's not going to be going down to where we have our water?
So, the chemicals and all that we were talking about, when they're in concentrated levels on a person's body or on their clothing or something, that's when they're really dangerous. But when they're diluted and they're in much lower quantities in waters, they don't pose the same health risks that they do when they're sitting on someone's skin. So, I was working with another chief who said dilution, 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 that's the solution. And I think that's sort of the way the industry views it right now, that once it's diluted and in very low concentrations, it just does not pose the same health risks and can go safely, based on all the regulations, current regulations, it can go safely into sewer systems.
And this has been approved by different plumbing companies that do the work at the communities or the complexes?
Well, this is based on regulations, EPA and health regulations based on what they will allow into sewer systems at those concentrations.
And so Barry has been giving input into that. Barry Searle.
I don't know who that, oh.
He's
Hi.
I've been involved in other public safety complexes before that utilize septic systems, and because of the current plumbing code, whenever you have a garage, such as the garage for the police station and also the garage for the fire apparatus, that floor drain is required by the plumbing code, but that floor drain cannot go into a Title V disposal system.
Thank you.
By code, has to go into a tight tank, but it's an industrial waste holding tank, which has alarms, et cetera, and has to be monitored. And in past situations like this, when we've had the washing stations for the uniforms, I have designed the plumbing to go to that industrial waste holding tank as well. And it's not necessarily required by code, but from a perspective of safety and protecting, in my opinion, we could take just the washing machine that goes from those clothes and the showers there, and take that to industrial waste holding tank as well, which will be contained there and pumped and taken to a disposal facility rather than to the septic system that would be on site.
Thank you. You answered my question perfectly.
So one of the written questions was about the aquifer. And I think, yes, how will this affect the aquifer? And I think that Mark's answer has addressed that there will be a tight tank, a collection tank for all of the hazardous material, and that will be pumped out and taken elsewhere. So, Chief, do you want to answer? Oh, excuse me.
Hello, Doug Hamill, 7 Sophie. So I'm still digesting the total cost, and I understand from the prior project, it's really hard to compare apples to apples. But as part of the feasibility study, did we compare to other towns that have a fire and police combined safety complex of kind of similar size and similar population? I think to kind of show how that weighs out across other towns, maybe not, cost to cost, because you can't look back to say even the prior bid that we did, but I think at least square footage to population and maybe population density, it might be helpful to help digest the amount.
Just as a more, this might be something that you Amy can respond to as well, but just as a more recent reference is the town of Lee, which has a population almost identical to Southampton, approved in their town meeting a public safety complex of almost an identical cost.
Identical square footage?
That I don't know. Almost identical cost, though, I can tell you that.
We get asked the square footage question a lot, the comparison of square footage correlating to population. And the one thing I'll say is that when you just look at the floor plan, the largest area in the public safety building is the apparatus base. And that really has less to do with population than it often has to do with other factors, like whether or not you have municipal water supply and you have fire hydrants around town, or whether you need to have a tanker truck, whether you have a lot of high-rise buildings and you need to have ladder trucks, whether you have water bodies and you need to have boats, if you have an aging population and you run a lot of ambulances and you have more ambulances. So the type of apparatus that each community has is different, and that really is a huge impact on the overall square footage of the building. When we do the programming, we make sure we get a list of all the apparatus, we get all the dimensions of the apparatus, we talk about how they're going to be arranged in the building so that the first run apparatus is going out the front of the building, and that anything that doesn't respond immediately or isn't used regularly is put in the middle of the building, and we lay that whole thing out and figure out what size the apparatus needs to be. The other thing I can tell you is that we do programming for communities all across the Commonwealth, and we know what needs to happen in these buildings. We know the sizes that these spaces need to be to function. And I can say that through our conversations, there was nothing unusual that either of the departments asked for. Everything made perfect sense based on the way they operate now and the way they anticipate operating, 20, 30 years out. So in our mind, this is the right size program for your community in particular, and for these departments in particular.
Hi, Bruce Bowman, Pomeroy Meadow Road. Excellent presentation, great need. My question really relates to the upcoming vote and the number of days between now and then to educate the community. Sorry about that. My question is really about the number of days between today and when this gets voted on, and the capacity to educate the residents of the town, and to put it into relative, to understand the costs and what it may boil down to. There isn't a whole lot of time to educate the community on this high cost. And I'm new to the town, so I don't know how well the town receives information, but if there are comments already that they didn't even know this was being undertaken, there's a big communication gap potentially with the residents, and to get favorable vote on this, there might be intermediate steps that need to be taken between now and voting day to ensure its passage, because I would hate to try to pay for this in future dollars than current dollars.
So the first step is to have town meeting look at the land acquisition. Once that passes, if it passes, then there's a minimum of a 35-day waiting period between when the select board can vote on looking for a override and when it actually goes to the ballot. It doesn't mean it will be 35 days exactly. It could be a little bit longer, but that's the minimum. So after that, then once the feasibility study is complete, and there might be some additional funds that we need to look forward to do the architectural costs, that'll probably be coming up in the fall.
In addition to some of the more public information, Valley Marketing is in the process of developing a brochure that's going to be sent to every resident in the town of Southampton. And on that brochure, we'll have some facts, but it'll also have a means to direct you right to the town website, which will have everything all the information that the committee has and that's been presented here will be on that website as well.
Is the plan that we saw tonight the final plan, or if the amounts are just too high to stomach, are there still cuts that could be made? For instance, the shooting range. I assume you guys shoot someplace now, and is it necessary for every town to have their own shooting range for their police? Aren't there other towns you could, like Northampton, Springfield, wherever? So that was a $500,000 item, I believe, on there.
Yes, it was.
So if we said, gee, where could we cut corners? Is that something that could be cut?
We did, actually. So that was in the initial proposal.
Okay.
And as the committee reviewed it, we thought, okay, that's a lot of money. We can find other means for that. So that was cut. That's not part of that cost. Neither are the carports. We reduced the cost to eliminating the carports. So what we felt we could reduce that
Has
wasn't a
already been
necessary
reduced.
function, we reduced.
And is the building in any way designed for a certain number of employees, in the sense that how big are the departments now and what's the percentage of growth 5 years, 10 years down the road? Is it designed to take into account growth in the number of employees for each department?
Yeah, when we did that programming and space needs assessment that I talked about at the beginning, that was a lot of the discussion, was not just about how you operate today, but what do you envision going 10, 20, 30 years out. So yes, we did factor in office spaces, living spaces for the fire department, for additional vehicles that might be planned in the future. All of that was put into consideration when we did the programming, so that you're building a building that's going to be able to work with the operations and adapt moving forward, and you're not faced with space constraints right off the get-go. There is definitely some room for growth.
Okay, thank you.
Maureen Groden, Cheryl Lane. I appreciate so much the work of this committee. It's been a long time, and we need this building yesterday. I think the people in our town that work in these buildings deserve a lot better than they've had for a long time. I just have a couple questions about the site. So you presented the site where there was a commercial lot for entry to Route 10, which I think is critical, and then you showed the donated lot. But Carl just asked a question about whether or not we're going to be asked as voters to approve the entire parcel. So I just have a couple questions. Are we going to be asked, and if you don't know this right now, it's fine, I just wanted to ask it anyway. Are we going to be asked about purchasing the commercial lot and then receive a donation, see if the town votes to accept the donation? Are we going to be asked to purchase the entire parcel on College Highway? If we're not purchasing the entire thing, will the voters know what the use will be of the rest of the site? I'm just worried about, these are fast-moving vehicles, and I just want to make sure everybody stays safe. And the other thing is, will we know if there are any conditions placed on the donation in terms of either the building or the site?
So the intent is to put to town meeting on May 7th the acquisition for the entire parcel. Assuming that it is approved, then that would go to the ballot just for the land acquisition. The other cost, the actual building cost and architectural cost, that would have to be later on in the year at a special town meeting. As far as future uses, I'd probably have to defer to the committee on that part, but yeah, so the intent is to go for the entire parcel. Roughly 56, plus or minus.
So just to be perfectly clear, that is all that will be on the May 7th ballot. And depending on the outcome of that, This committee will then know how to proceed, and we anticipate a special town meeting in the fall to further this. So if the entire parcel is purchased, then the land is established. You know, we can then move forward. Placing it, we can move it around that parcel if we want to, or keep it in the same location. And if the town chooses not to, if voters choose not to purchase the parcel, then at a special town meeting, we will need to vote on just the donated and the commercial single lot. So that will, all of that will be pursued at a later date, at a special town meeting. And to further answer your question, that allows us a few more months to engage our community and to make the project known.
Just maybe another point to clarify. One of the reasons that we're looking from the select board and the town administrator point of view to go toward hopefully negotiating a reasonable deal to purchase the entire parcel is we're trying to look for longer term planning ideas and problems in town. We've got various committees in town that have come to us. We know that affordable housing has been an issue for a long time. The housing committees, housing authorities come to us. The Park Commission has come to us, and believe it or not, are running out of space at Conant Park and at Labrie Field, and are looking for some, I guess I would call them spillover play fields. There's been talk of a variety of other things from various other committees. So we had a joint meeting hosted by the Select Board probably, I'm forgetting, maybe 6 weeks, 2 months ago, where we had representatives of Planning Board, Open Space Committee, School Committee, Park Commission, Housing Authority. I'm sure I'm forgetting a few, but just about everybody that had come to us saying, hey, look, we've got issues. We're trying to think toward the future in town. This is a parcel of land that is very centrally located, could meet a lot of needs for a lot of different uses in town. And so beyond just the Public Safety Committee desire to have that location as well, I think we're trying to look for the longer term use of a large parcel of property. And that's hopefully what we will be talking about on May 7th. Okay, thanks.
Relative to a question that was in the box, it said, why is there not more being shared between departments, more space being shared between departments, in particular kitchen? I can tell you that, and perhaps Amy can as well, but through law enforcement purposes, there has to be a distinction between the two. We can't share, even though we're public safety entities and we work together, we can't share common space because of criminal offender record information. For instance, our custodian has to be cleared to be within our building, not escorted. So anybody that comes into our building that's not cleared through what they call Corey, they have to be. So if we have workers come in and work, they have to be escorted by officers. That includes firefighters. So if firefighters were to come into our police department, they have to be escorted everywhere they go because of criminal offender records information. That's a very significant protection of privacy that is mandated by law.
So we need to wrap this up soon. I'll go through these few questions. Will the voters know if the landowner has any conditions for the land/building? So I think at this point, we are at a stage, as Scott just described, where we're negotiating for the entire parcel. And until we resolve that, until that is known, we will not be pursuing the the 125 College Highway, which is the donated parcel and the commercial lot. So we will stay tuned on that. Are there grants and rebates for legislative landmarks to help fund this. Or legislative landmarks to help fund this. I cannot answer that. Can anyone? I'm not aware of any. Amy is not aware of any. Will the voters know what else is planned for the surrounding lots? And we don't specifically know yet, but as Chris just described, there are many potential uses that will arise in the future. And so it's too early. It has been too early to start planning, but we do know from the Joint Committee meeting that there is a need for centrally located flat land.
Hi, Stephen Johnson, 20 Walcott Road, and member of the Select Board and the Planning Board. I want to speak strongly in support of your successful negotiations to acquire the entire property. And to expand on what Chair Chris described and what you've described, we're putting before annual town meeting the acquisition. The architectural plans and the building are later. But it's a fair question, what are we going to do with nearly 10 times the acreage that we need for the public safety program? There has been a lot of input from the community and a lot of expectation of us as leaders of this community to create that opportunity. And so we need to go beyond visioning, or rather a wish list, to a public charrette process where we engage all of these interests and figure out who lives compatibly side by side and which ones don't, and how their participation might help offset the purchase price. So I've heard from our chair a commitment to a public process, and I really wanted to hear that reinforced here tonight. We need to acquire the whole property. It opens up many possibilities, and that needs more specific public input.
I have one last question here, which perhaps has been answered. Does the proposed size allow for future growth of the town? And yes, Janet and Amy have been projecting 20 years into the future. So we are at our closing time. We're just past our closing time of 9 o'clock. So many thanks for coming out, and I hope that over time, I hope that this has convinced you of our great need for a new facility, and I hope you have been very impressed by the beautiful work that Janet and Amy have done for us. So thanks to them for traveling from Charlestown and for their good presentation, and we look forward to finishing up this project with them, this phase, the feasibility study, and we're very pleased thus far with what has been developed. So again, thank you very much for coming out.